do you have arthritis yet from the amount of words you've had to type out over the past couple of days, or how do you recover from the amount of newsworthy items that have popped out since Monday?
No, it's been all right because you can just copy and paste a bunch of the portal stories and change the name, just insert name. So that hasn't been as bad. I always say I could actually have to work for a living, so I never. It's always good for me. I'm sitting in a heated room. There's stuff coming, so be it, But yeah, it has been a crazy newsy time for Husker football, though.
Brian, let's start with the transfer portal, I suppose. Have there been any additions that have just straight up shocked you yet?
I'll preface it by saying nothing shocks me anymore in the portal era, because you just always have to be prepared that, oh man, okay, that happened, yeah. Mekhi Bayer and Butler, I guess, stand out as they're veteran guys who had given you a lot of quality snaps, and Bayer in particular was a guy who really developed through the program. If people remember, he didn't even play his first 2 years. Then he popped up suddenly in the Rule era on, special teams. That first game against Minnesota kind of took off as a linebacker, had himself a solid season. And I know he's got a lot of options on the table already by just saying he's going to enter the portal. So, I don't discount those departures, and I don't just, brush them off my shoulder or anything. But I guess those two sit out. Obviously, James Williams is a promising and has been a productive pass rusher. So I think that one hit people hard because they've kind of liked his story and all that. But to simplify, nothing has stunned me. Jacory Butler was up front a week or two ago talking about coming back and getting his master's here. So we're just in a different world now. And of course there's a lot in flux with coaches and stuff like that. So you never know if there's an impact there.
BC, I don't want to get you in trouble. I don't want anyone to come after you from the Huskers or anything like that. But has there been anyone that you're surprised maybe did not enter the portal? Was there someone that maybe you had kind of the eyes on for, or someone, maybe parts of the roster you've been looking at that you're surprised haven't taken that jump in yet?
No, I wouldn't say that. There's definitely guys that, and I think anybody could name them, that you're protect them at all costs, young players that, obviously start with QB1, but, Jacory Barney and all those Miami kids.
Yeah.
Especially with some Nebraska staff, having being down in Florida now, you always worry. It's a ways from Tallahassee to Miami. It's 7.5 hour drive, but nonetheless, you're a little bit all hands on deck about some of those names. Cause you could go through every Miami kid that was a freshman this last year, and there was they either did something really well on the field or stuff was being said well about them behind the scenes. And so I'm not saying that to get people all worried about them, but those are guys I'd want to protect, a lot. So those are names that come to my mind. I didn't think they'd be in there. I just don't want to see them in there is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. BC, I know it may only be about 7.5, 8 hours from Tallahassee to Miami, but those are two entirely different countries. I don't know if
exactly. They are. I know that. I lived in Florida for 7 months, and I learned that. Yeah, it is way different, but they do have some Miami influence developing on that Florida State staff, so you got to be aware of it.
Miami is like Miami, and Tallahassee is like Mississippi. It's I don't know how to explain it. But it's a whole different thing. And
I apologize to our Tallahassee listeners. I'm sorry you had to hear that.
No, it's true. The Panhandle is wild.
Hey, from a guy from my Panhandle. All right, you relax now. I don't take Panhandle slander.
The Florida Panhandle is wild. BC, as we kind of go through, as you mentioned, some of the coaching changes and things like that. Obviously, Tony White goes down to Florida State. Still kind of waiting on some other ones, but it seems like Dakalb Shorts is going to be on staff working with the wide receivers. What do you know about him? I know he spent some time at Kentucky and also at Houston before that. How far have you gotten into the Dakalb Shorts research?
Not a ton, but if Dana wants him, and then he should be here. I mean, Dana Holgerson's got to pick the guys that he feels work best with him. And, I'd add to this through our reporting, Garrett McGuire's still over there. It could be a revised role, or maybe there'll be something else elsewhere that pops up, and you'll have to consider that. But I like the hire of Shorts on the surface because, he worked with Dana at Houston, and he worked with Tank Dell, who was a very, very good player and is in the NFL already. And people might remember Holgorsen was asked about Jacory Barney like a week or two ago, and he was mentioning Tank Dell and like how there's a comparison point there. And so go back to the question I just answered about keep those Miami kids at all costs. I would hope that a guy like Jacory Barney is kind of excited as he gets to know Shorts, is like, okay, he did work with this guy I was just compared to, who was a third-round draft pick, is doing really well in the league. Let's play this out with these guys because they might know what they're doing with a guy like me. So I think even though he's a younger coach, he's done enough that I think he'll grab some guys' notice right away. And he's definitely an up-and-comer in this business. There's no question about it. His name was not new to me because we put out a 30 for 30 list and every year on 24/7 Sports, and he was on it. And so I always kind of know some of those guys. So a lot of times with an assistant coach, I might have to Google him. It's like, okay, who is this guy? I actually knew the name. I didn't know everything about him, but I was like, okay, I know that one. So that right away kind of had me with the idea that he'd be here.
BC, when it comes to just the addition of some of the offensive staff, when it comes with Holgorsen making these hires, there's always been that conversation about finding Rule's guys that Rule has worked with before, has a relationship with, and his relationship with Holgorsen was, not necessarily flimsy, but felt like they had maybe crossed paths or were in the same room at the same time. Do these new offensive hires need to follow that same pattern, or is it more of Holgorsen's guys that he's going to be able to bring in as he sees fit?
Yeah, I would say it's more the guys Holgorsen sees fit. I think, Matt Rule's going to have a say on everything. I don't want to say otherwise, but I think he's going to have a lot of faith in a guy who has had the resume that Dana's had, coaching offense and being a head coach for 13 years. And I think the biggest deal about Holgorsen returning also is those two can be sounding boards off each other. Like it's sort of rare company when you actually have guys who have sat in the captain's chair for more than a decade as a head coach and experience all the ups and downs and the things people don't even know about that go with that job. And so I know people are like eager to see what Dana can do with like a full runway with the offense. But Monday's news of him returning to me was as big that those guys can use each other now, to help each other through some things. And okay, this is happening. What would you do here? What do you think about this? And I would hope that's a part of the process because Dana was 92-69 as a head coach. A lot of guys would like that record, and he had his share of success. So he's a good guy to spin some ideas off of.
BC, switching to the other side of the ball in terms of hires, obviously the search for a new defensive coordinator is well underway. Are there some names that pop into your mind that you say, hey, I'd like to see this person get a phone call or I'd like to see this person end up at Nebraska?
No, I don't have anyone in particular I would just mention like that. Obviously I know the in-house name that, like, if you've laid like betting odds and if a place in Las Vegas put it down, they'd probably put John Butler near the top just because of his like resume that's pretty deep. And people will remember the interview he gave. I think it was with The Athletic when he left the Buffalo Bills. Like, I want to be a head coach or a coordinator, basically, is what he said. I'm paraphrasing, but that was it. So certainly he's a guy that you think about. I just think sort of like I mentioned, Dana as a sounding board. I know Phil Snow is that for Coach Rule. And Phil Snow's going to be 69 in December, and I'm not saying yay or nay if that means that he'd still be interested in coaching. If he is, maybe that's a possibility. But even if he's not, I think he's somebody who Matt Rule trusts so much, they would certainly have discussions like that guy could fit well here in this league because of these reasons, and they could probably lay it out pretty well. And so it could be somebody out of left field. Nobody was talking about Tony White when he got this job 2 years ago. You know, he was a name that was out of the blue to us. So I'm totally aware or thinking of the possibility that Matt Rule could throw us a little bit of a curveball here.
On that same note, is there more of a probability that the next defensive coordinator for Nebraska football is closer in terms of scheme to Tony White, or do you think it could be someone that has a better fit with what Matt Rule wants, with the expectation of his program and what he's hoping to build?
I think, you know, we get so caught up in like the labels. All of us outside the walls usually do. Like, okay, remember when Tony first got here, the 3-3-5, and we were so enamored and breaking it down and looking for every little piece of info we could have on it. I think the biggest thing about Tony's defense and what makes him a successful coach for the most part is how bendable his scheme is. And so you saw that with how they could fluctuate, how many D linemen were, you know, they played. And there were certain games where even Matt Rule had some suggestions, like maybe let's go a different route with how many down linemen were playing or switching it up. So I think you're looking for somebody who has a track record of flexibility. Maybe they have, yes, this is my base scheme. I run a 3-3-5. I run this, I run that. But you see off of it how it branches out and how they've done different things when faced with different tests. Because we have to think about, we're no longer in a world where you're in like a 10-team league. You're in an 18-team league. And, you know, there used to be like even a decade ago, we'd talk about like, oh, this is a Big Ten style offense. This is a Pac-12 offense. Remember, we'd get in all that. They sort of had like a theme around those type of offenses. That's no longer the case. There's so much, you know, diversity about what you're going to see each week, just even within your league. So you've got to have a defensive mind that I think can match wits with that and know that I could see something in Big Ten play that is completely different on a game that's on October 7th compared to October 14th. And this is how I would adjust to that. So I think that's what you have to look at most of all.
We're talking with Brian Christopherson, Husker 24/7. BC, kind of, you know, trying to take a little bit of a step back from the events of the past few days. If you were to kind of rank what storylines you're looking at the most between now and the bowl game, what are you kind of focusing on the most?
The thing I wrote Monday, and this is the first part today, and I think they're doing a good job of it, is you have to hold serve with your recruiting class. I think people's stomachs were in knots, you know, with the news coming so close to signing day. We're in such a weird time where the season just ends. Okay, your coordinator leaves, and it all just, you know, rubs up against one another where now it's signing day. And so you're trying to make sure you keep all the kids. It seems like they're going to do a pretty good job with that. You know, Malcolm Simpson told us he was going to sign with the Huskers, and so that's one I'm hopeful of. So that's like my storyline of the day. Did they hold serve there and not let the news of the last 48 hours really wreck what could be a top 20 class? After that, you know, the portal opens for real in a few days. And so there is going to be more. And it's just like, can they keep the guys you really need to keep? You know, like you are going to lose a guy who's played some snaps for you here or there, which we've already seen that. But you got to keep certain guys. I've mentioned some of those Miami guys. Obviously, Raiola, you got to make sure he's around. Those are the things I watch. And then, obviously, the D coordinator and what sort of staff adjustments are coming there. This is going to be a fascinating press conference at 1:00. It's kind of unfortunate because usually respect is properly given to the recruiting class itself, and most of the questions are about that. There will be some of that, but there's been so much news that honestly we have to dive into some other topics with Rule today, and it's just going to be interesting what he says. You know, like how does he feel about guys who have said publicly, I'm going to go in the portal? Could they come back? Like what's he say about his staff as it sits right now? There's some interesting answers around the corner in about 4 or 5 hours.
The past few years, Nebraska fans have gotten so used to being at this point of the college football season that coaching changes, transfer portal additions or losses usually just mean preparing for next year, but there's still a bowl game to go to. How many of those questions have to be answered for Matt Rule in this moment? Because we talk about the long-term goal of hiring a defensive coordinator, but you don't have a defensive play caller on staff.
Yep, you got to answer that. And the D-line is a real thing. I mean, there's some pieces there that won't be there. Obviously, Ty has said he wants to play in it. I know Nash has been dealing with a knee, so we'll see what happens there. But you worry sort of about attrition at maybe certain spots, and D-line could be one of them. And then you've got this fascinating, I'm not saying any of these kids are going to play, but Christian Jones, who you guys I know interviewed today, can practice in bowl games. So this is a unbelievable time. But you're right. He's got to answer some of those questions about this is who's calling the defense. This is our direction for this month at least. And we'll see if he confirms his wide receivers coach too, and maybe some staff adjustments. So I don't know if he's ready to do all that, but that's sort of the weird cocktail of a press conference we're about to have at 1:00. That's probably different than any signing day press conference I've ever been a part of.
Yeah, BC, it kind of seemed like you you thought this here, but have you feel like we've kind of forgotten about there is another football game that's going to be played?
What's that?
Do you feel like we've kind of forgotten there is another football game that's still to be played this year?
Yeah, we have. That's why they need to get through today and hold serve with this class. Hopefully the portal noise for now kind of trickles down. Obviously, there's going to be more in the next week. And then Sunday, you get that official announcement. And I do think that will do good for a lot of people just to see Nebraska against this team in this spot. There is a game. It is really happening. Plan accordingly. That is going to be a big deal, I think, just psychologically to actually have the specifics in front of us in this case. But you're absolutely right. I think people right now are distracted for other reasons. And it is different because a lot of programs, frankly, if they were 6-6 and they're going to a bowl game, it is sort of, so what now? That would be their mindset. But around here, we've made such a thing about it because it's been 8 years. There is this eagerness for that game, and yet you have to balance it with all this big picture stuff. So the exciting part is, and I'm hoping when the portal opens for real, Nebraska can keep a lot of the young offensive guys, and it looks sort of the same. We get some extra time with Holgerson with those guys, and you get to see what that looks like, in a bowl game. So that could be something where they could really iron out some wrinkles maybe with some extra practices. So that part could be something, if people are looking for positives, that could happen.
The bowl game appearance is probably the bigger deal in the main course of the season and where Rule wants a projection of this program to go. But is there pressure to get the bowl win as well? Or do you get the sense that everyone's let's just make sure we get through these next few weeks and we're going to celebrate the bowl appearance and the success we've had this year and then get ready for the next step? Obviously, they're going to play the game. They're going to try to compete. But is there pressure to get the win itself?
I don't think there's any added pressures. I think let's put it this way. I think there's been more pressure on some games within the regular season than there will be on that one. That said, you're going to either have a winning season or a losing season based off of that result. It would be nice for Nebraska to spin that forward hey, they had a winning year. 7 wins is better than 6. You got to take what you can get. And I think guys have to really – I do think the guys who are here are going to go all out for it. And that could be an advantage Nebraska has in that game. We'll see who they play and what their motivation is on the other side. But I do think once we actually get to the practices with the guys that are on the roster right now, Nebraska will be enthused to play in the game. And that sometimes is the settling factor in those. Like, you guys will remember, this is a little ways back, but Pelini had a team that went, and was it the Holiday Bowl? He got situated against Washington in like a rematch where they played for the third time in 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And Nebraska had creamed them in the regular season. Nebraska was not excited to be there. Washington was under Sark at the time. And Nebraska took it on the chin against kind of a mediocre to bad Washington team. So I think enthusiasm is everything in those bowl games. And I do think Nebraska will have it once we actually get to, okay, here it is, and these guys are involved. I think, and you're going to get some young players who get their first real chance too, I think, and that's going to be exciting.
That's Brian Christopherson, Husker 24/7 BC. We appreciate the time as always. Hope you get a sleep at some point this week.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks a lot, guys.